Thanks for having me. This is great, and it was actually great to hear a little bit of this morning's discussion. I might be a little distracted as I move through this, but I'll try to get through these slides pretty quickly. This will be a high-level sort of overview of EPA's indicators effort, as well as this new report that we just came out with. So we just released a new, it's not a new set, but another version of this report, which has some new indicators in it, and so that just happened in August 2nd, so real fresh, and everything's on the website now. So it's a little bit of that, but there's a lot of topics I think that'll be relevant for folks here in thinking about indicators. Again, so we just released this report. This is a long-standing effort that we have. It seems ambitious here. We have 4 different editions here, but there's a lot of motivations behind this. This allows us to sort of keep fresh with the data, the most recent science, add additional years of data to these indicators, add dimension, depth, fill gaps in the indicator set. So we keep publishing as part of the effort here. We'll go through some of the indicators that are new just this year, and then preview a few indicators just as a way of how we put these together, where the data is coming from, and then we'll just take a look at some of the resources that are available. So we can kind of think of this, the effort of having these 3 prongs. We're tracking, compiling, assembling, getting indicators in place, and these are, this is the report and the indicators themselves. There is a national focus here, although we do have global, we're talking about climate change, so there's a lot of global indicators and metrics to provide that context. So there's tracking, there's a publication component, and this is important. This is how we get it out there. This is usually the material is peer reviewed and put onto the website, and we're updating that website on the fly, usually every 6 months to a year, with new data and new information that comes available. And then the last component is in between, sort of in the off seasons of putting all this stuff together. We're out there doing research, getting the word out, working with partners, and trying to get additional indicators, and getting the word out, I think is really key. And it does consume a lot of time. Incidentally, the publication too consumes a lot of the resources and a lot of the effort. So taking that on, don't forget about that. It is an important piece, especially if you're peer reviewing and going through all of those different steps. So about the report, again, this is the 4th edition. It has 37 indicators now. The primary purpose here is to communicate the causes and effects of climate change, and so it is geared towards the public, but it's accessible to multiple audiences here. We partner with over 40 agencies and organizations, mainly federal, but many others, and so this is highlighting additional data. And this topic sort of came up earlier. I think there is a win-win situation when you have an indicator set and people are contributing to it. You can point to it. Our work is going there. Our data is being used by EPA. So there's benefits to having an indicator set and having these organizations participate. It makes it credible. It makes it diverse. It is credible and vetted. It's consistent with the latest climate science assessment reports, like the National Climate Assessment that USGCRP puts out. And again, we do a discretionary peer review of the information in the report and all of the new indicators. So highlights, here's just in the bottom right an indicator of the indicators effort. Over time, we're just adding additional indicators and metrics each time around. There is a growing body of evidence that climate change is happening now in the US, and so we're really leveraging this information and highlighting it. One of the new features in this report is linking to climate or human health There was a recent USGCRP report on climate and health, a big national assessment. So we had the ability to say a lot more there. And it's one thing to just compile these indicators and people don't understand why this matters to me, but we're trying to make that connection and see, inform people, why this might matter, how it affects human health, and who might be the most vulnerable. And again, new partners and new indicators came along with this latest edition. This is just to give a bird's eye view. This is sort of dated information, but it was important at least to say that I think EPA could do a better job of tracking who is using this information, but we have an email box of people requesting the report and various things. And so we're just sort of compiling that information. A lot of educators use this. A lot of other government, local, state governments are requesting this information. The general public is consuming it both on the web and the report. And so a variety of folks, and I think we could do a better job of just teasing this information out and really getting a handle on it, especially on the heels of this latest release. What makes a good indicator? This harkens back to Peter's discussion, very, very similar criteria that we use, and this is how we describe or what governs what makes it into the report or what makes it a good indicator. There is a set of criteria that we document. Incidentally, it also helps with that documentation and the meta documentation. It's all about transparency and listing all of these pieces of information to your indicator, even if it's the most established, well-established one out there. It still allows you to fill this information in. So these, I wouldn't rank them necessarily. Some are a little bit subjective, but it allows you to work through these and ensure that all of the indicators possess this and have these characteristics. Here is the suite. If you were looking at, say, the table of contents of the website, we bin them just logically into sort of these categories. We are trying to tell the climate change story, so we're including greenhouse gas information, emissions, atmospheric concentrations, climate forcing, all the way down to bird wintering ranges, stream flow, and ecosystem changes with the indicators there. So this is very just an easy way to sort of bin these. There's also, so anything in red is a new indicator this year. We have a few features where it's like a closer look into a regional area, into a specific data set maybe in that area, and sort of telling a bit of a story. So there are different kind of ways to feature these long-term data sets. The box at the bottom there is just to indicate that section that talks about climate change and human health and making those connections. It's a little breather in the report that allows us to do that just in the middle, right before health and society. Just a few observed changes. CO2 continues to climb. We went over the 400 parts per million just recently, which is sort of a symbolic milestone there. And you can go all the way back 800,000 years in the record that we're documenting. Average temperatures, we'll see the temperature indicator in just a minute. But again, this is temperature, sea level, coastal flooding, which is a new one. You've probably heard about this one. I'll show this in just a minute. Arctic sea ice, very, pretty typical climate variables that we'd be tracking. Ragweed pollen season, this is just a sort of a health-related indicator showing the frost-free season expanding, and therefore the ragweed pollen season expanding, and sort of a northward direction. And we'll see that as well. So here is the US and global temperature, just to give you an example here. 2015 was the warmest year on record, and 2016 is tracking to be even warmer. But the last 30 years, we've really seen a rapid increase in temperatures. We show the global version here, anomalies from a very long-term baseline, 1900 to present. Anything going up is an anomaly, a warmer year. Anything going down in blue is a colder year. The US, we have, incidentally, temperature, we have the luxury of over 100 years of data and a pretty good data-rich way in which we can show the US temperature across a map like this. This is coming from NOAA, former NCDC data set, or NCDC, a data set that they provide here. So this is just temperatures, sea level. You have to have sea level, and this is relative sea level, and we have much of the mid-Atlantic. You see increasing sea level rise. This is, of course, in relation to land elevation movement as well, and so there is some variation along the west coast in Alaska where things are going down, but again, tide gauge data from NOAA. This is 67 sites, a cumulative rise over time in this time period, 60, 70 years of data. Coastal flooding, somewhat related to this, also using the same tide gauge data, looking at a different threshold, and this is the nuisance level threshold, which you probably have heard about as well. This is a level in which there would be minor level flooding. It's usually a coastal advisory issued at this point, but there's here we're just looking at 27 long-term tide gauges which have this defined threshold from the Weather Forecasting Office, and the trends in the frequency of flooding from back in the 1950s to present. And when you compare the two, there's a dramatic increase in this minor flooding, these flooding events per year. Some sites you would think would have more flooding do not. There's usually some armor, seawall protection already in place, so it's not as evident, but in other places you do not have that. There's also health concerns when cities do flood. There's actually been quite a few issues with what to do with that water. Once it is, you have to pump it out. It's usually polluted. Where does it go? So there's some city planning and community planning aspects to this impact. Heating and cooling degree days. This I'm just showing another this is based on temperature data, but you can get the data at the state level, and we have sort of interactive maps showing this change over time. It too, just like the temperature, is a very long-term time record. Cooling degree days, heating degree days going down, cooling degree days going up. This is just based on a threshold temperature of 65 degrees. West Nile virus, I threw this in. This is sort of the health-related indicator, and maybe a third take on the direct, indirect discussions that we were having this morning. With a health outcome, epidemiological data, it is hard to sort of trace that back to climate changes in climate. Plus, we're working with a very short time record, 2002 to present. West Nile was first discovered, or first reported, rather, in 2000. So we don't have a whole lot of data, but the science is pretty strong. That mosquitoes, the vectors are influenced by climate. Dry seasons, winter temperatures, drought will lead to outbreaks. So it's important to track this indicator even though we don't have a super strong signal to the climate variables. And this is sort of independently looking at just the cases of West Nile virus. So we're making progress in this area, but it just represents one of those cases where if you're trying to an indicator detecting a climate change signal versus one that's related to climate change and may bear out in the future, but yet worth tracking. This is that section on climate change and health, sort of plotting the indicators along a pathway of climate impacts. It's important to track extreme temperatures. It's important to track sea level rise, hurricane, and then there's an exposure component. And then there's the health outcome component. We have indicators in each of these areas. We could fill this out a little bit better, but it also helps the user, the people of this information, understand the connections here a little bit better. How does climate change affect human health? What indicators can tell us about human health and who specifically might be at risk? The stream temperature indicator, this is a new one this year. This I came across Mark Bennett actually a year and a half ago or something, and we started a collaboration with USGS to sort of get this information into the form of an indicator. So I worked with Karen Rice and John Jastrom, and we put together sort of an operational data set together to allow us to put this information out. And this is 55 years or so of data on stream temperature trends and throughout the Chesapeake Bay region. The 80% of the sites or so are seeing an increase. There's some variation across the north, but sort of a really good regional depiction of stream temperature where we just haven't had that information out there before. So this was a nice addition, nice collaboration, partnership. Marine species distribution, this is also a new one. We were working with NOAA here at the Fisheries Service. This is based on data from the bottom trawl surveys they do off the continental shelf. And this is a northeast. In the right, you're looking at the northeast. And the movement of species, so they tag and identify these. This is sort of like the center of abundance for these species. We're seeing a change in latitude and a change in depth over time when you look across a composite of all of these species from 1982 to 2015. Again, this is sort of analogous to the bird wintering ranges where you see a poleward shift in these species over time. We can break these out individually and show it as sort of a composite indicator as well. And it's been really useful. I encourage you to go to Ocean Adapt. That is where the data is kept. And it's really easy to work with and use. But it's been a nice addition and good effort by NOAA to get this data available. Some of the resources that are out there, again, the website comprises everything. We do a print report version. This is the third edition. We don't have the fourth edition quite yet, but it'll be something like this. The website, again, you can download all of the figures. You can get the data that went in to create those figures. You can get the technical documentation that sets up and describes how it was derived, where the data come from, even links back to that original data. You can order copies, and there's plenty of things to play with and open up in ArcGIS with some of the maps. So a lot of information and material up there. What are we thinking of and doing next? There's plenty out there, and I think one of the things we'll continue to do and still have ongoing is work on additional new indicators. We're continuing to expand the suite. How far do you go? How big do you get? It's sort of dependent on resources, but we're just going to keep adding, and it is helpful to have partners making these data sets operational to just leverage and just fold in. Give them a call each year, give us the updated data set, and then we can add it. It's helpful to have that partnership. So facilitate the application of these indicators. Make sure people are understanding how they can be used, how they can set context, whether it's adaptation, any kind of planning that's going on. The report, again, it is nationally focused. We don't have any single constituency, but there's enough information in there. We think that it can be used at many different scales, and again, to sort of set that foundational climate background. And then continuing to engage. Going to meetings like this has been great. And again, I appreciated being here this morning because there were so many things that came up that we went through, and I'd be happy to share some lessons learned about how we operate and came together. I think it was mainly, build a core, get a core set, stand that up, and then you can build around it, and then perhaps when you build it, people will come and help and add, and you kind of go from there. But with that, I'll just stop there, and happy to take questions or talk about anything that you'd like.
Great, thanks, Will.